Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you of this little guy. This is the Longines VHP. This is a very interesting little watch, and as a quartz guy, a true quartz enthusiast, I suppose, I am absolutely very, very happy that I've gotten a chance to check this little guy out. And I want to thank, actually, my buddy Aaron Shapiro. He's another EDC reviewer, does bladereviews.com, I believe. He sold this to me at a very nice price, and so I appreciate that very much there, Aaron. First off, let's do a little bit of a size comparison here. This is not a very, very large watch, and I appreciate that deeply. In a world where watches have become dinner plates, this is reasonably sized. Here it is against the Omega Seamaster Professional 300. Omega is a sister brand of Longines. They're both part of the Swatch Group, and so these comparisons are going to be happening over and over again. Here it is against an Omega Planet Ocean 8900, and so you can see, and we'll also do a lateral size comparison. It's a little bit thicker than the 300 here, which is from an earlier era, a simpler time, if you will. But that's absolutely the size that we got going on here. Here it is against another high-accuracy perpetual calendar sort of movement here, and that is the Citizen Eco Drive Octavia. Octavia Professional, I suppose. And so you can see size-wise, they're very similar here. And then here it is against another high-accuracy quartz movement. This is the Breitling Aerospace. So, again, size-wise, there you go. And, of course, let's do some measurements here. First off, and I have finally coated my my calipers in some cello tape for all of you cringing. Including the crown, we are looking at, let's millimeterize it for, so we're looking at 45 millimeters, including the crown, and about 40 millimeters excluding it. The lug-to-lug distance, which I find is really important for good fit, especially for us folks with smaller wrists, we're right at about 50 millimeters in terms of lug-to-lug. That's not stellar, but it is definitely a thing. Here we are looking at face diameter is right around 34 millimeters, which is not so bad after all. Then the lug width for the band, which you can absolutely take off and replace, is about 20 millimeters. So there you go. That's your size overall. Next thing, a quick note on Longines. Longines, by the way, it's not Longines. By the way, you know, that's a way to get a little bit of trouble if you walk into a watch store wanting to see the Longines. But anyways, Longines is it's a group that's within Swatch. Swatch Group owns pretty much all of Swiss watchmaking these days, with a couple of small exceptions, Rolex, Breitling, etc. But Swatch is, they've got all different levels. So Certina, you've seen on the channel before. Omega, you've seen on the channel before. Longines is sort of their, it's one step down, sort of in their hierarchy of brands relative to Omega. And that's, so you get very nice value out of Longines because you're not paying for the Omega name, but you also get a step down in finishing, and in many cases it almost feels like they're trying to protect Omega by making the Longines a little bit less interesting. That's not something I love, but that's who Longines is here. So anyways, let's go ahead and talk about the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly of this very interesting little watch here. So on the good side, first off, you know what? On the whole, the finishing on this guy is pretty good. You can see there's a nice brushedness to it here. I mean, the links are brushed. That's nice. The sides of the bracelet, that is, are absolutely not brushed, though. You get a little bit of a polish on them. It's not like an incredible, oh my God, high polish, but you know what? It works. It's a fine little polish, and so I appreciate that very, very much. And overall, the finishing, I mean, every one of the indices is applied. You also get an applied 12 and a 6. And what I mean by applied is that they are on there as a separate object rather than just being painted on, as is in the case, for instance, with this Breitling Aerospace here, where the 4 and the 5 here are just Loom paint applied to the dial. So that is a nice little detail there. You can see that the hands are nicely made. You got a little bit of a crimp in them, which makes them, you know, reflect light in different ways. So I appreciate that. I mean, the finishing on the whole, and even the back of the watch, it's got a nice little sort of soft finish around there. You've got the nice little engraving here, some other information. Not a big problem there. Finishing on the whole, nice, can't argue. The clasp on this guy is also pretty good. If you're a fan of butterfly clasps, and I am honestly not, but this is a good one, because you can see here, I mean, it gets a little bit of branding here, but it requires you to press both sides for it to come undone, which is a nice thing, although actually there it didn't, because I'd already popped one of them loose and kept tension. But nonetheless, this is a nice little clasp. As far as butterfly clasps go, it's good. It's also relatively small in this dimension. Sometimes you'll get these really wide clasps, which don't play well for wrists that are relatively small, like mine. I have about a 6.5 inch wrist here, so not super huge. is it 6.7 or 7.7? I don't freaking know. Anyways, guys, long day. But it works well, and it wears nicely on that as a result. The bracelet on the whole is actually, it's nicely finished, and it works well. It doesn't pinch hairs. It's not a bad bracelet, except for one dimension that we'll talk about later on. Overall, it's a wearable watch. It works well. Nice bracelet. Way better than, for instance, the bracelet on that Aerospace. There you go. Next thing, the hands. All of the hands here, the second hand, the minute hand, etc., all point directly at the indices when they're supposed to. We can see the second hand here wandering around and pointing at every single index, which is great. That's not something that you necessarily see. You see it on a lot of higher-end quartz pieces, but for instance, okay, on this Omega here, but let's compare it to this little guy. This is an Invicta, which I'm going to be doing a review of. Sorry, watch guys, but you can see here that it's not the case that the second hand is uniformly hitting an index. It's going right between there. It's bouncing around like crazy, whereas this is a very precision, pointy second hand. That's something I appreciate and nice to see. Next thing, this is a strongly anti-magnetic watch. What that means is that although most quartz watches are less affected by magnetism, they can't get magnetized unless you throw it into an MRI machine, in which case you got bigger problems anyways. But this will actually go so far as if you hold a magnet up to it, which stops the second hand, it will reconnect. It'll correct itself, so it goes back to the proper positioning. That's a nice little trick, and it's something I appreciate very much. Next thing, this does have a little bit of a starburst dial here. You can see as I kind of rotate the watch around, the little grooves, they're a bunch of little tiny concentric circles. I'll see if I can zoom in and show this off. Yeah, there you go. Check it out. And that just gives it a nice little look here. I appreciate very much that they're doing that because it gives a little more visual interest than just, a plain dial. So that's good. It's got a little bit of a downside we'll talk about later, but that's a thing. Next thing, this is a perpetual calendar watch. What that means is that the date will always be correct. Recently we went from February 28th to March 1st, and for most watches, you're just going to be showing the 29th and the 30th and the 31st, so you have to go in and manually correct the date. This watch, however, does not have that. It will always show you the correct date because it has stored basically inside there in its memory the calendar, such that it knows that, okay, we just hit a leap year, and so yada, 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 and it can figure out what the date should actually be on the basis of it being March right now, March 16th, rather than April 16th, which will have, one fewer day, etc. So that's a nice little feature. Is it a big deal? No, not at all. But at the same time, it's something that you just don't have to think about. And I always appreciate when makers think about things I don't have to think about. Then finally on this guy, on the good side, we have a nice solid lume to it. I'll go ahead and charge it off camera here with a powerful flashlight. What you can see here is that the lume is quite good. You have Loom pips at every place except 12 and 6, which instead have the gigantic freaking numerals, in case you forgot where 12 and 6 were on the dial. But you can see you get Loom pips, you get very nice Loom on the hands here, hour and minute that is. There's no Loom on the second hand. And then you get even a Loom pip to the side of the date here, which I appreciate. But it's strong Loom. This is a watch that I could throw on and then read at at like 6 a.m. before the light comes back, and that's great. Big fan of that. The good lume is something I look for, and especially somebody who wears a watch all night. That's excellent. So the lume on this is solid, and that's the good, is that it's got solid looms, nice sunburst on the dial, perpetual calendar, it's strongly anti-magnetic, the hands do hit every one of the indices, which is great. It is a nicely finished bracelet with a good overall clasp, and you know what, the watch on the whole is pretty nicely finished. It's not super high-end, it's not oh my god, and it doesn't compare well to some things, but it's pretty damn good with nice polishing on the rounded side. Anyways, what's great to me about this guy is actually the movement. This is a Swiss high-accuracy quartz movement. So what I mean by that is, what is accuracy in a watch? Well, in a mechanical watch, one way to define accuracy is like a spec. Some watch companies, so for instance, Omega, another Swatch Group company, guarantees that their watches will be between 2 and 4, at the minimum it will run 0 seconds a day fast or slow, which is good, or at max it'll go up to 4 seconds a day. That's per day. Your average quartz watch, so for instance, take this little guy, an Omega Seamaster. This is a non-high accuracy quartz movement. This guy runs about, I don't know, maybe 5 or 10 seconds a month fast. That's actually, I think it's closer to 5 or so. And that's really accurate. That's seconds per month fast. And so, every couple of months, you might want to adjust the second hand, or you might not because you don't give a damn. A high-accuracy quartz movement has a higher standard, too. This will keep accurate time to within 5 seconds per year. That's much, much, much less common. And I appreciate that. It's something that shows that they're going the extra mile, even though this is a quartz watch. And so having high-accuracy quartz, and it's not super common. You get it in the aerospace here. There aren't that many Swiss high-accuracy quartz watches, and so that's great. But in addition to being high-accuracy, the movement's got some other nice things. It has a low power mode, which I will actually, I'll talk about the independent hour hand here, which means that you can adjust the hour hand without losing the second. I went ahead and pulled the crown out, and if I give a quick spin, now it's moved backwards exactly an hour. If I spin it back, now we move forward again. So if I want to travel 3 hours back, if I'm going to like San Diego or something, all I need to do is that, and now I'm back. My second hand has never lost accuracy. I'm at the same minute, etc. You can also adjust the minute by turning more slowly. See? Now I'm adjusting the minute. But at the most part, if you don't do that, you can very easily just adjust the hour, and that's great. So I appreciate very, very much that you're able to adjust that hour very quickly without losing the second-hand accuracy. So that's nice. It also has a low power mode that we're going to see here in just a second here as I pull the crown out. So if you pull the crown out, the watch will proceed to the next minute marker, basically, and then put the hands into what basically amounts to a sleep mode, which means that it won't be moving the second hand, it won't be moving the minute hand, it won't be moving the hour hand at all. It will just not require a whole bunch of power. It'll keep the time accurately underneath there. But if you've got the watch in that mode, until you press the crown back in, at which point it returns to the actual time. It'll change the hour, the minute, the second, go into the date window and whatnot. But it's basically using very, very little power. This is great, because one of the biggest bugaboos with quartz is that if you store it for a long period of time, well, you might run out of battery. And this reduces the chance of that happening. Now, look, all of these things, these are little details here. And most quartz watches are pretty solid. But having all of these things in one place is excellent. This is a great little quartz movement. And honestly, this is something that I hope to see Swatch using throughout the lineup. I mean, why is this not in? And see, right now it's going to the low power mode. It's moving the hour and minute hands to 12, moves the second hand there, and the date just stays the same until I click it back in there. But why are they not using this movement in some of their higher end stuff from like Omega? I've speculated, conspiracized, that they just make more money off mechanicals, so they keep Omega mechanical, but still. It's great to see this. And now I'll go back out of low power. And you can see here it's going to adjust the hands, then the seconds will go back to where they need to go, and case closed, problem freaking solved. That's a beautiful thing. I'm a big fan of this movement, and it's great to see this kind of thing coming out of Swatch Group here. Just the hour hand back. So to me, that's what's great, is this is just a stellar watch movement, 100%. So on the bad side, first off, I gotta say, the price on this guy it's about $1,000. You can probably do better, actually just do better. Don't pay retail, talk to a jeweler or something, talk to your local guys, heck, talk to my local guys, Louis Jewelers and Alba, they'll help you out. But if you compare this guy to another brand, so for instance, this is a very close comparison. This is the Citizen Signature Octavia watch. If you look at this guy in terms of finishing, it actually exceeds the Longines in a couple of ways. I mean, it's just, look at the polishing on the indices. It's just better. Look at the dial. It's more interesting. If you look at pretty much every aspect of this watch, I mean, here you get some nice polishing on the side. This is just a better finished watch, but the thing is, this watch is about $500 if you pay retail, which again you probably shouldn't. This watch is about $1,000, and this has perpetual calendar. It's high. I'm not sure it's guaranteed high accuracy, but it's working out that way 100%. This is just, I don't know. The price is just not great. I mean, the Swiss make watches expensive. That's what they do. That's what that country exists for. That and cheese. But it's not a great thing. Next thing, if you compare it to other watches, like this little guy, you are missing some features. For instance, this guy is not a solar watch. It requires a battery, and that battery will die, and you'll need to get it replaced every few years, 2 to 4 years or so. That's not great. I'd love to see the Swiss go solar as well. It doesn't have a radio control, so it doesn't pick up on a signal from atomic time, which is a really common trick that quartz movements can use, and that actually makes the high accuracy less necessary, because it just checks the time, and it makes sure it's properly set. So it's missing that. I mean, at some level, like I said, it's a great movement. It's very advanced, and it's great for the Swiss, but compared to what the Japanese have been running for years now, they're just playing catch-up, so that's not great. Next thing, this has a button. You press this in, and nothing happens. Quite literally, nothing happens. There is no function to pressing this crown in. Yet it still is a thing. You can still do it. And I don't get that. It's a little bit weird. Next thing, ticking-wise, this is actually louder than your average quartz. You're probably not going to be able to hear it, but here, I'll hold it up to the mic. I don't know, maybe you can hear it, maybe you can't. But a couple of times I've been just sitting there like on the couch or something reading, and I'm suddenly hearing like tick, 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 like, wow. Okay, that's weird. And so, not a huge fan of that. Whatever, not a big deal. Next thing, the independent hour hand. So like I said, you can take this guy out, you pull it out to the first position, then if you spin it quickly, you end up with advancing by a full hour. But the problem is, if you don't spin it quickly, if you spin it too slowly, then guess what? You're moving the minute hand, and you've just lost the accuracy of your seconds hand. This is a high-accuracy quartz. That's part of the feature here, and I don't quite get that. I kind of wish that they made it harder to adjust the minute hand, given that a big part of it, and to lose the accuracy of the second hand, I don't know. It's not a big deal, but it's something that bugs me a little bit. Next thing, this is a quartz watch. It only stops every hour. I'm sorry, every minute. The second hand, guys, come on. It only stops, the second hand only stops at the second. There's no situation in which you would have micro gradations within seconds here. And yet, if we look at this on the dial, in between every second marker, there are two separate sub-markers here. In between all the red seconds mark. Why? Why are we doing this? It just ends up making it look a little bit more cluttered, and honestly, there is literally no way that could ever be useful in this watch. That just bugs me a little bit. Not a big deal, but it's a deal. Next thing, the dial on this guy. I was mentioning I like the starburst, and I do at some level, but unfortunately, this is a very low contrast watch. Because the polishing is good, but in many lighting conditions, really all that you can see on this is the loom. The white portion, the loom pane inside there. And you know what? That's okay at some level, but at another level, it felt like there were many positions, especially with 12 and 6, where the dial is dark and the numbers are dark, and it's harder to read. And I'm not a big fan of that. It's not so great. And so the low contrast is not something I love. And really, this dial, the sunburst, only looks good in some angles and some lighting conditions. In other cases, it can turn black, which is, fine, I guess, but oftentimes it just kind of washes out. Not a huge fan there. Next thing, there are sharp corners everywhere. So for instance, when you pick the bracelet up like this, or if you have relatively small wrists, you'll notice that the bracelet kind of, the lugs that is, kind of hang off the side here. I'll try and put this guy on. And when this is happening here, especially at the top, you get these very sharp corners right at the edge here. And this is not good. I mean, it's sharp in the extent that it'll scratch you. At one point in time, I rolled over with this guy and ended up scratching my fiancée pretty good in bed, which was kind of crazy. This is not something that should be happening here. The fact that the lugs, that the bracelet doesn't go down to the lugs, and the lugs are that damn sharp, that's not great. And similarly, you get sharp edges right over here. You get sharp edges in a bunch of places that just don't need sharp edges. And so that's not super impressive in terms of finishing. Speaking of finishing, although the finishing on this guy is good, it's not to Omega levels. And look, it's not an Omega watch, but at the same time, if you compare these two watches next to each other, there are levels of polishing. There are areas of difference in terms of the overall, and this is an old one that's kind of beat up. Here, I'll show you the Planet Ocean. This watch is just much more nicely finished than the Longines here. Again, this is a much more expensive watch. I kind of get it at some level, but, considering that the Omega Quartz watches weren't that much more expensive than this, but they were much more nicely finished, it's not super impressive me given the price. Next thing, and I'm beating up on this guy, but, there's places for them to learn. Next thing, there is a resynchronization issue here. What I mean by that is that it is the case that this watch, so when you replace the battery, if you take the battery out, you have one full day of power reserve within it, at which point it will keep the calendar information, it'll keep the time information. That should be fine. If your jeweler is attentive, they take the back off, they pop a battery, and they put the back on, you're good to go. That shouldn't be a problem. And similarly, you will get an end-of-life indicator on this guy. It will start, the second hand will stop moving differently to indicate that your battery's about to run off. And then even after that, after the watch stops, it will keep time internally for 6 months, even on a dead battery with the watch stopped. The problem is that if you've gone through all of those, if you've gone through the end-of-life indicator, you've gone through this 6 months of the battery looks dead, but it's still ticking along in there, or you take the battery out for more than a day, at that point, it has to go back to Longines. That's right. If the battery is left out for more than a day, this needs to be sent back to them to reprogram the perpetual calendar. That's not good, particularly, because this is... Why? I wish they would at least provide documentation for how this is set. I mean, I'm assuming that there's probably some process by which they use this little button here. You know, you click the button 16 times and then 4 times again, and then that sets it so that the hand gets pushed into position. But the thing is, yeah, setting a perpetual calendar is a little tricky, but tell us how to freaking do it. Don't make it so that if something happens to the watch, where I, go on a trip for a year and come back and my watch needs to go back to Longines, that's just not great. It's vendor lock-in, and considering that other companies, like I just set the perpetual calendar on this Citizen last night, and it's just a question of figuring out, okay, each one of these represents a year of or a month of the year, and then is it March and in the 3rd year since the leap year? It's not so damn hard, guys, so why are you making that happen? So the resynchronization thing, it's probably not going to be a problem for most people, but it is always kind of a looming threat, and the fact that you'd have to send it back, pay a bunch of money, be without it for a long time, if you happen to, leave the watch off your wrist for 6 months or something and it dies, that's just no good. And then finally, on the bad side, honestly, at some level, this watch is kind of aggressively vanilla. What I mean by that is that the style-wise, there's nothing super interesting here. There's nothing that's like jumping out at you, making it unique, that makes it, crazy. I don't know. This watch just feels like your prototype of a watch. That's fine. Not every watch can have a really interesting design. Not every watch can be, a unique little snowflake or anything like that. But by God, is this thing kind of boring. And I don't mean that in the sense of a great tool becomes boring, although I think it is at that level as well. But it just... I don't know. Yeah. So, to me, that's the bad here, is that it is kind of aggressively vanilla. If it does run out of power, if the watch, or worse still, if your jeweler just forgets about it with the battery out, you're going to have to send it back to Longines. The finishing is just not that impressive compared to some of the Quartz Omegas of the past here. There are sharp corners just everywhere. The dial can be pretty low contrast. They're using micro gradations on a quartz piece. The independent hour hand is a little finicky and makes it very easy to accidentally get the time to move your second hand there. It is a little loud in the average quartz. The button press does nothing. It's missing some of the features that you get on Japanese quartz, like solar and radio control, and the price is just really high relative to what you're able to get from Japanese companies for very similar timepieces. So there you go. On the ugly side, there are 2 issues here. The first off is the bracelet. So look, I said the bracelet's nice, and I mean that, but it is completely non-adjusting. You are able to remove this guy. I mean, it is a conventional, punch-it-through sort of link bracelet, so you can do that, and you can add and subtract half links, and they even have like a 3/4 link sort of solution as well. But there is no way to adjust the bracelet as you're wearing it. I mean, take a look at this. It's another watch from Swatch Group, so the same damn people. But here you can press this little guy down and instantly and without any kind of tool, add a little bit of adjustment from when your wrist swells up. Basically, what this means is that you have a watch that fits you right, maybe 50% of the time. The rest of the time, it's either too loose or too tight, depending on the swelling of your wrist. This is just not okay. I'm sorry, guys. It's 2018. We can make bracelets that adjust. Let's do it, okay? And then finally, on the bad side, this is a 5-atmosphere water resist on this watch. So, okay, I already hear people up in arms. Like, Nick, are you ever going to go deeper than 50 meters underwater? Well, no, probably not. But the simple fact is that as a watch ages, the seals that keep it waterproof are going to age as well. Those seals on the backside and inside the crown here are important. And if you start off with 5 meters, which is probably fine to shower with, to give you a sense, probably okay in a hot tub, after 10 years, you may not be okay to shower with it. You may not be okay in a hot tub. As opposed to if you start off with like 100 meters of water resist, chances are that throughout the lifetime of the watch, you're going to be fine. And so this is just a really unimpressive sort of thing. And honestly, it feels a little bit like, well, we don't want to make it compete too much with the Omegas. So let's just keep that a little lower. They can do better than this. You barely ever need to use the crown. Just make it screw down. Case closed. Problem solved. And so I really dislike the fact that they just kind of wimped out on the water resist. They can do better. Swatch does it all the time, but they chose not to. And that choice is just, to me, stupid and ugly. So that's the ugly here, is that it's only 5 atmospheres water resist, which is not leaving the kind of margin I want in a watch. And then it is also a non-adjusting bracelet, which, come on, we can do better than that there, guys. So, final conclusions. This is a watch that is very nice. I mean, I've been beating up on it a little bit, but that's a part of doing a detailed review. do. It does have a lot of good things going for it. I mean, the case feels very solid. The finishing is, on the whole, pretty damn good. The loom is great. I gotta give him credit there. It's got some very nice details, and it has a very, very nice movement. With the perpetual calendar, the high accuracy, the independent hour hand, there's a lot of joy going on here. But it does also have the issues. I mean, it doesn't compare well to Japan in terms of features, price. It's got the low contrast dial, which honestly did bug me on a number of occasions. I'd look down and it's like, okay, only by virtue of loom can I see the time, or in some lighting conditions, even then, it washed out completely. It has this non-adjusting bracelet, which sucks about 50% of the time. It's only 5 atmospheres, and the proprietary reset thing, it's probably not going to be a problem for 90% of people, but that's a problem. That's a failure mode, and I don't like failure modes. I don't like lock-in like that. And at the end of the day, you know, for me, honestly, the biggest issue with this watch, it's a fine piece. I could wear it. It could be my only watch, but it feels just really vanilla. I mean, it's very nice in a lot of ways, but it kind of falls short of greatness in nearly every regard. I mean, the movement is very, very nice, but it's missing some things that could have made it great. The finishing is very nice, but it's missing some of the details that could have really made it great. The water, I mean, it feels like it always gets right up close to greatness and then never drops over the line there. And I kind of suspect, like I said, that it feels like they've kind of decided at many levels, well, it's not an Omega, we don't have to try that hard. And that's not good, and especially when you compare it with brands like Citizen, who are willing to go that extra mile, who are willing to push over the line to great. And by the way, I haven't finished my review of this guy yet, but where it feels like they've put a lot more effort in relative to this guy, that's super unimpressive. I mean, movement aside, there is nothing super excellent about this particular watch. And ultimately, I think that this watch has one big lesson for us, which is that the Swatch Group, that is, does have an incredible quartz movement available. And this really is incredible. And this belongs throughout their lineup. This is a quartz movement that is absolutely worthy of Omega. I mean, Omega's past quartz movements have been pretty damn good. This has an independent hour hand, but it doesn't have perpetual calendar. It doesn't have high accuracy. If they can put this movement into this watch or to one of the new Seamasters, that would be, oh my God, take my money good. I would love to see Swatch using this movement throughout their lineup to restore quartz to Omega for people for whom mechanical is just not the best choice, because I think that for many people, mechanical is not the best choice. So there's just no reason that a Planet Ocean, a Seamaster Pro, couldn't be running this guy. And so I really hope that Swatch is using this as a test bed and then jumps it up into the higher end as well. But look, ultimately, like I said, I hope this is a test platform, that we'll start seeing this more and more. And after a little while, you know, this watch will be a little less relevant because that movement is everywhere in the lineup. But the thing is, as it stands, there's just not really any desire to keep this guy around, because you can get quartz that's better finished from, you know, an older school Omega quartz, which is absolutely great, or from Citizen for that matter. The Citizen Signature line is just better finished in every way. You can get quartz that's got better features, things like solar, etc., from Japan, or even from like Breitling or something like that. I mean, you can get much better value pretty much anywhere but Switzerland. Let's be real here. And although high accuracy is nice at some very nerdy level, regular quartz is absolutely good enough for pretty much everybody in the world. And so, although I like the watch and it's bringing a lot to the table, at some level, high accuracy is cool, but I don't think it's worth $1,000 worth of vaguely lazy vanilla to go there. And so ultimately, the VHP did not raise my HP. Whether it's in the RPG sense or the heart rate thing, whatever. Anyways, this is a nice piece, but not sticking around. Hope this has been interesting to you, that I had a very accurate review here, and that you have yourselves just an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.